Let's cross to Queensland now and catch up with the Nationals Senator for Queensland, LNP Senator for Queensland, Matt Canavan. Joins us from Rockhampton. Good to talk to you. Matt, tell us first up what you think about Anthony Albanese backing in at least a 5.1% boost in the minimum wage case.
Well, Chris, it's more evidence that Anthony Albanese, number one, is not ready to be Prime Minister, and number two, doesn't really have a good grasp on economics. He's never held an economic portfolio. I think it's incredibly dangerous for a Prime Minister to start nominating, particular to the percentage point, mind you, pay rises that are required. If we get such a wage setting competition going within the political environment, that will lead to a wage price spiral where no one will be better off. We'll just chase our tail. So you might think, yippee, great, I get a 5% pay raise. If you get a pay rise one year and every...
Just let me jump in, because I think it's an important point. I want to understand and make sure our viewers understand the economics here, because we're talking about the minimum wage, the lowest paid workers in the country. We know that inflation is 5.1%. There are all sorts of cost of living pressures. So you might think, well, fair enough, surely why not give those people at least a pay rise to keep up with inflation, keep up with the cost of living? What is the downside of such a decision, especially seemingly taken on the fly by Anthony Albanese?
And that's the point, Chris. It's on the fly here, because the downside here is that if you give that precise, as I say, to the decimal point, pay rise, and that flows through the economy, which often the minimum wage setting does, if everybody's pay goes up, then prices will go up too, and suddenly that extra pay you think you've got is just being chewed up in higher prices. In fact, those prices might be even higher again. And that's where you end up into an inflationary spiral. That's what we've got to try and avoid now, desperately try to avoid. Unfortunately, inflation has gotten out of the bottle to a certain degree. Some of that's due to COVID recovery, some of it's due to the war in Ukraine, some of it's due to excess money printing around the world. But we've got to do everything we can here rationally to get prices and inflation back down. Then everybody will be better off. Sort of offhand comments from someone who wants to be a Prime Minister about a certain rate of pay rise is not the way to do this. That's why we have an independent body to make these decisions, to try and take the political heat out of it and make a rational decision, like the Reserve Bank does on interest rates, that is best for the economy as a whole.
What are we going to see happen here, though? Because his earlier stuff-ups have just been facts that he didn't know, and so he's just had to apologise and sort of try and correct them. But this is actually a position. The final submissions for the minimum wage case closed today. The Fair Work Commission will make a ruling eventually. The union movement, employer bodies, government all make submissions to this. The employer bodies are talking about recommending a 2.5% increase in the minimum wage. Anthony Albanese has to explain, doesn't he, exactly what his submission as Prime Minister would be to this case in the here and now.
Well, exactly, Chris. It seems to me that all Anthony Albanese has done is take the inflation rate printed last week and say, let's do that. It's a lot more complex than that, because you need to look at the underlying reasons for that inflationary increase, what type of goods are going up, why they're going up. Are they going up because of supply pressures and shortages around the world, or is there something underlying in inflation to do with it? That's what the Fair Work Commission is there for. Now, any government may make a submission to the Fair Work Commission, but you'd want to know that submission from a government would be taken in a considered fashion. And I doubt there's any consideration here from what Anthony Albanese has done. He's gone off-piste here, just randomly picking a number. And I think that's a very dangerous approach for our economy. I don't think he's ready, as those other faux pas have shown, to take the top job.
Now, I want to go to climate and energy policy. Labor's push for net zero. They're going to do a lot of that with electric vehicles. Some interesting analysis today by experts in the Daily Telegraph that's shown us that they've grossly exaggerated the impact of electric vehicles. It's predicated on much lower power prices, which we all know are going to be hard to deliver. Interestingly, I think the graphic here, one of the Labor election campaign advertisements for an electric vehicle policy shows a $200,000 Mercedes electric vehicle that you can't even get in this country yet. I don't think that's what we're all going to be zipping around on. But, you know, look, there's going to be a drift to electric vehicles, particularly in the inner city, and that's a good thing. That'll save people some money, and as long as the power prices aren't too high. But you don't want to grossly exaggerate what's going to go on here. You would think for the foreseeable future, most Australians are going to rely on internal combustion.
Well, Chris, I've got no problem with people who want to buy an electric car. Good luck to you. They've got a lot of talk. People like that. Go for it. But there's 2 points to make here. One, I don't want my taxes going to subsidise often very wealthy people to buy their next vehicle. I don't think that's a fair allocation of resources. If people are rich enough to buy a $200,000 electric car or even a $60,000 or $70,000 one, well, good luck to you. You can do that. The second point to make here is they're not all they're cracked up to be for the environment. As I say, I've got no problem if you like and enjoy electric cars, great. But don't think you're saving the planet driving one. They actually produce much more carbon emissions in their construction because of the greater energy intensity of the minerals production that go into electric cars, the nickel and the cobalt. So you normally have to drive one for 2 or 3 years for it to become carbon neutral. And if you're operating in a country like Australia and you're charging it at night, they're pretty much going to be coal-fired powered vehicles. That's what you're going to use to charge it up. So currently we use oil-powered vehicles, and you're switching to coal, you're actually potentially going to be worse in terms of carbon emissions. But again, if that's your choice, if you get your kicks out of electric cars, go for your life. Just stop it with all of this moral hand-waving that you're somehow a better person because you can afford a Tesla.
Coal-fired cars, that's what they are. Let me briefly show you Anthony Albanese today campaigning with Daniel Andrews in Victoria. That hadn't happened so far in this election campaign. The two of them were campaigning together, and here's what the Victorian Premier had to say.
Every federal dollar that Victorians get from the miserable Morrison government, we ought to bow our head and treat it like it's foreign aid. We have been ripped off by this Liberal National government. And instead of Mr Morrison talking about these issues, he ought to have been here delivering for Victorian workers and families.
Albo and Chairman Dan together. Now, as a Queenslander, Matt, you know that bashing Canberra on behalf of your state usually pays dividends.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that comment of Dan's. Is Victoria now, is it Danistan? Has it separated from the Commonwealth? And we are now providing, so we've got some kind of Belt and Road agreement with Victoria from Canberra to
You
Melbourne.
reckon he's thrown his lot in with the Solomon Islands?
He's playing us off, for whoever the greatest bidder will give him subsidy to bail his debt-ridden state out after he's mismanaged COVID, mismanaged the pandemic, and they're in a big world of trouble there in terms of debt. Now, it's absolutely incorrect too, historically incorrect. The vast bulk, or the most of the COVID support the federal government provided ended up being provided to Victoria and Victorians because they had the largest COVID spreads, because, thanks to Dan, they had the longest lockdowns in the world. And so the Australian government supported all Australians, as we should do, but the greater impact of COVID was concentrated in Melbourne, so they got the greatest amount of support. But I do think that a lot of Victorians, the feedback I get, my wife's from down there, her family's from down there, I think a lot of Victorians are going to use this election to say what they think about Dan Andrews and how he's been managing their economy, the autocratic, king-like attitude that he's taken to their jobs, to their livelihoods, and the way it's shattered many of their dreams. And I'm hearing that the Labor Party are in a bit of trouble, especially in those outer suburbs and regions where the impact of lockdowns was extremely severe, and there was contempt given to them from the laptop class in inner city Melbourne.
Indeed, we shall see. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
Thanks, Chris.
Matt Canavan there from Queensland, finishing up on Victoria. Foreign aid, they call it in Victoria. Maybe it really is Danistan. We're only joking.